Flowey Is Not a Good Life Coach by unrestedjade. Chapter 5. The amount of fun is actually rather small. Papyrus stayed in the woods until it was time for their practice. As he ascended their usual hilltop, which by now was getting pretty torn up and ruined, he found Flowey waiting for him, staring up at the cavern's ceiling. "Do you ever wonder what the real stars look like, Papyrus?" he said, his gaze fixed upward. Papyrus stopped short. He'd been going over what he would say to Flowey all day, and now his thoughts were scattered by one unexpected question. "Sometimes," he said. "My mother and father told me that the real stars move," Flowey said. "They said that the sky turns like a wheel, and all the stars turn with it, but it's too slow to really see." "Oh," Papyrus said. He hadn't known that. He didn't know why Flowey was bringing it up, but it made him a little glad, in an unsteady way, that he was. It felt familiar, like things going back to normal. Flowey turned to look at him, his face uncharacteristically somber. "They just spin in circles above the earth, over and over. They always end up back where they started. They never really go anywhere." Flowey wondered what Papyrus's reaction to that fun fact was, but the helm hid the skeleton's expression and the plate armor made his body language hard to read. It was wonderful. This was the first timeline in which Papyrus had successfully joined the guard. Well, the first time he'd done so while the guard meant something. It was the first time he'd donned this armor, and Flowey gorged himself in the novelty of it. "Come closer, friend," he said, beckoning Papyrus out to the open. "I want to get a better look at you." Papyrus obeyed, as always, kneeling down so that Flowey didn't have to stretch to see him. "It's kind of mismatched," Flowey said, looking Papyrus up and down, "but it's a good start." Nothing fit properly, but Papyrus had clearly done the best he could with what he was given. Once he'd distinguished himself, he'd be entitled to a higher quality kit, and wouldn't that look impressive? "Ah," Papyrus said, armor clanking gently as he shifted his weight. "I actually wanted to talk to you about something before we, got started." "Oh?" Flowey said. He wondered if his toy had gotten over his little snit already. Papyrus had been standoffish since they'd last spoken. Well, as long as he did as he was told, Flowey didn't see the harm in letting Papyrus cop an attitude every now and then. "If it's about this morning, don't worry about it, friend. I know how siblings can be. Mine used to get me in all sorts of trouble, he said, raising a few vines to run them over the plates of Papyrus's armor. He had to admit Papyrus did look cool, even if the suit was just cobbled together hand-me-downs. Papyrus didn't pull away, but he shuddered lightly. "No," he said. "It's about what you said yesterday. I was kind of hoping that we could—" He trailed off for a moment, as though he'd suddenly forgotten his next line. Flowey turned his attention away from the armor and looked up at him. He could just make out the twin pinpricks of light glowing in Papyrus's eye sockets through the visor. "Go on, friend," he said. "If you have a request, then go right ahead. This training is for your benefit, after all." Papyrus went tense, steeling himself for the words that burst forth. "I was really hoping that we could just stop this now. I mean, I'm in the Royal Guard, and honestly, that's all I wanted. And I'm very grateful for your help, but I'd very much like this to end because I don't like it at all, and I'm upset and nervous all the time, and I'm worried that something's going to go wrong, and it will all be my fault, and—" Papyrus, shh, Flowey said, not without tenderness. He gathered up Papyrus's hands in his vines. "I'm going to go ahead and stop you now, okay?" He gave Papyrus's hands a reassuring squeeze. Papyrus nodded, looking at the ground. He was trembling like a leaf. Flowey smiled. "It was very brave of you to say that to me, Papyrus." You mean you're not angry with me?" Papyrus's shaking subsided. Flowey laughed. "Oh, Papyrus, there's no reason for me to be angry, is there?" He pulled Papyrus half a step closer. "You're my friend, and I care about you. Does this really make you so unhappy?" Papyrus nodded again. "I know you're hurting," he said, more confidently. "I know you've suffered things you didn't deserve, and I can't imagine what it must feel like to be in your position." He looked up, searching Flowey's face for something Flowey was certain he wouldn't find. His eyes glowed, earnest and open. "But you must stop. If you're my friend—" Papyrus gripped the vines around his hands. "I know you can do better, if you try. I'm sure of it." Was he now? Flowey could have laughed himself to death right then and there. Oh, Papyrus, always putting his faith in precisely the wrong people. Flowey was going to remedy that flaw if it killed the both of them. I'm very truly sorry to hear you feel that way, Papyrus, Flowey said. But can I ask you one question? Papyrus looked up to face him. Did you think you were in control? Flowey's grip tightened as Papyrus jerked back. I'm glad you're grateful for what I've done for you, Papyrus, he said, stretching farther into the chilly air. Because you'll have much more to be grateful for before we're done, which will be when I say, not you. Never you. Please, Papyrus said, vainly pulling against the vines, his voice rising higher, edging on hysteria. I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to do this. You don't say no to me, friend. Flowey whipped his vines forward, casting Papyrus onto the ground. On your feet, guardsmen, and ready your magic, he hissed. Papyrus pushed himself upright, moving more laboriously under the weight of his armor. Flowey could just make out the outlines of urethral bones forming between them. Better, Flowey said, preparing his own opening attack. And remember, Papyrus, for your life. Papyrus had improved a great deal over the past month. His attacks had grown stronger, and he cast them faster and more aggressively. The calculated patterns had become more unpredictable, fashioned to lure Flowey, and any future enemy, into a false rhythm before springing the trap. Flowey was taking more hits than ever, much to his delight. It had been an easy way to gauge his toy's progress, and he had nothing to fear from the skeleton's magic. Not really. In return, he kept up a steady hail of bullets, forcing Papyrus into constant motion. Harassed on all sides, Papyrus redirected his attacks as shields. Bones rippled along the ground like mobile stockade walls. More than once, Flowey lashed out at him with a vine only to recoil, stung by a blue attack raised at the last moment. Ironically, the major weak point now was the suit of armor. Skeletons had little mass of their own, and Papyrus was struggling under all that extra weight. In time, he would adjust and be just as effective without it. But tonight, after a mere hour and a half, Papyrus was spent. He went to all fours after a glancing blow knocked him off balance. Get up, Flowey said, wrapping his vines around each other into a heavy flail. He brought it down. On the third save reload, Papyrus managed to roll out of the way in time to avoid getting crushed. He stumbled to his feet with a grunt of effort, flinging an attack in Flowey's way in the same motion. The arc of bones bit into him, all but a few finding their target. Flowey's leaves hung in tatters, sap oozed from half a dozen new gashes. He giggled with delight as Papyrus led him into the space between two alternating waves of massive bones that caught him and mashed his form like the molars of some great beast. He roared with laughter when he felt his main stem hit the ground for the first time. Oh, but this was splendid! And then the waveform collapsed, Papyrus's magic dissipating like frost on a warm window pane. The skeleton bounded over to him, babbling apologies, and skidded to a halt at his side. Flowey felt the warm prickle of a healing spell spreading over the worst of his wounds. Oh, Papyrus. What, Flowey said, are you doing, Papyrus? I'm sorry, Papyrus said yet again. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. Flowey reared up, knocking Papyrus backward into the muddy, churned snow. Idiot! Why did you stop attacking? Papyrus stared up at him, uncomprehending. You were hurt. You dare? Flowey loomed taller, splitting open half-healed cuts in his haste. Do you really think you were any danger to me, you worm? He bellowed, spittle flecking onto his lower petals. Attack! Climbing to his feet, Papyrus backed up, hands raised in a gesture of pleading submission that never failed to annoy him. Please, he said, you're hurt. You can't ask me to. You would refuse me again? Flowey lashed out and dragged Papyrus closer with a makeshift leash of vines. You're really trying my patience tonight, friend, he said, choking on fury. You're forgetting your lessons. With a flick of a vine, he tossed Papyrus's helm aside. The skeleton stared up at him, the lights of his eyes constricted in terror. Mindlessly, he clawed at the vines around his neck that were squeezing hard enough to dent the gorget. Please, Papyrus said, stuck repeating the same futile plea for mercy over and over. Please, please! Restraint. That's what Flowey needed to remind himself of when this game ran into difficulties. As cathartic as smashing Papyrus into a shower of dust would be right now, it wouldn't get him any closer to the endgame. I think you need a refresher, he said, smoothing his voice into a neutral tone. "You need some course correction, Papyrus. Get on your knees. I don't want you to fall and hurt yourself." Confusion jolted Papyrus out of his fear just enough to let him move, obediently sinking to his knees. "Give me your arm." Shaking, Papyrus extended his left arm. Flowey slipped one of his vines from around Papyrus's neck and twined it around Papyrus's arm from wrist to elbow, sliding along underneath the steel vambrace. He could feel the bones under the thick padding the skeleton wore, softer and more pliant than flesh. Not that it made a whit of difference, even hard muscle was nothing compared to his vines. For a moment, he simply stroked Papyrus's forearm, as though comforting a skittish pet, one that needed more training. "Papyrus," he said, gently, "I'm going to break your arm. Don't struggle." "No!" Papyrus pulled against Flowey's grip, too exhausted to put up much of a fight despite his panic. "No, no, no, no!" "You keep saying no to me, Papyrus." Flowey wrapped the vine tighter. The creak of bones bending under the pressure was drowned out by Papyrus's blubbering, but he could feel it. Papyrus felt it too, going rigid. "No, no, no," he whispered. "No, please, no, 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 no!" The final syllable rose into a shriek as Flowey bore down, pushing the slimmer bone past its limit and snapping it in two. "Stop saying that word to me, Papyrus." Flowey watched as Papyrus scrabbled at the vine around his arm with his free hand. He couldn't put much strength into it, shaking and bawling like a child. Pathetic. He gave the remaining bone a hard, twisting wrench. He felt the cracks spiral down the bone's length under his grip. Papyrus screamed. Flowey gave the ruined arm a final squeeze and let go of both arm and neck. Without support, Papyrus pitched forward. He landed badly and howled in renewed pain when his broken arm was jostled by the impact. The skeleton pulled his arm in close to his chest, curling into a fetal position on his side instinctively to shield the injury with the rest of his body. "A member of the Royal Guard wouldn't cry about a broken arm," Flowey said, over the whimpers and hiccuping sobs. "But I won't tell anyone." He let Papyrus cry it out for a few minutes. Maybe this had been a good thing, in the long run. Papyrus clearly had a lot of built-up tension that he was now getting out of his system. Crying was healthy, right? He'd heard that somewhere. Flowey certainly felt better. "Now that you're a guardsman," Flowey said, once Papyrus's sobs had grown more muffled, "you need a new carrot, right? New goals. I bet you 20 gold that you could replace Undyne in 6 months. What do you say?" Papyrus hiccuped. "I know it sounds like a stretch, but you can do anything you set your mind to, friend," Flowey said. "I believe in you. And once you're captain," he went on, reaching out to stroke Papyrus's head with a vine and ignoring the flinch this elicited, "you'll be close to King Asgore. Won't that be neat? You just stick with me, Papyrus." He took a moment to appreciate the tableau. His favorite toy, damaged and reeling, lying in the snow beside him. Papyrus would come back from this better than ever. What didn't kill him would only make him stronger. "I'm going to make you a hero, Papyrus," he said. "You're going to be a legend."